empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? We're 6 seconds, 8 feet, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to the Scoop World Order 8th grade Phenom edition. We had to make one today about a young kid named Tyler Atkinson who's out of Georgia. As far as Nevada and I know, we've been doing this for around, he's been in it for 20 years. I've been in it for, at least 15, 20 years, player, coach. I can't remember an earlier offer in the history of Ohio State football. So we figured we'd break this kid down. What makes him so special? Is he the next Chase Young? But he's a freaky kid for as young as he is, and he's got a bright future ahead. So we're really excited about this one. But real quick, as always, thank you guys. You guys are the best. Our videos have just been going crazy. So please leave us a like. Leave us a comment. Maybe comment on the first Phenom you remember in recruiting, a kid that maybe got offered as a freshman. I remember, when Jamari O'Neal got offered as I think he was going into his sophomore year. That was a big deal back in the day. And some of these kids pan out and some of them don't. And it's just real interesting to see the kids that kind of maybe hit puberty a little early and they're a little more developed than some of these kids. And if they flatline or if they keep growing. So it's gonna be interesting to watch this kid. So I'm gonna bring in Nevada. Nevada, how are you today, my man?
I'm doing great. Not as good as this 8th grade Phenom, but having a good day. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Ohio State and Georgia. I'm sure he'll get Bama, LSU, because it's like once, Georgia dives in, everybody's got to dive in. That's kind of how the rule is. But in your history, you in pre-show, you talked about Danny Clark, a kid that, was offered as a freshman. How many of these kids have actually been offered super early and have panned out to the level?
Kirk, your video's frozen.
Talk a little bit about some of the guys that maybe were offered really early, and if they panned out or not. I mentioned Dylan Moses as a guy that was offered as an 8th grader by LSU and Bama. Didn't really pan out, didn't even get drafted. Talk about some of the guys that you've seen get offered incredibly early in their high school and even junior high careers.
Well, obviously the most notable one for Ohio State that I can remember was Danny Clark, who got offered as a freshman, and he looked like he was going to be the next big thing, and that didn't turn out too well for Ohio State. Obviously, you've got what was it, John David Booty or Josh David Booty or whatever it was out of I think by USC when USC was kind of rolling. They offered him like he was in 8th grade or 7th grade, and as you said, a lot of this is just symbolism. A lot of this is just kind of getting on the kids' radar. Kids tend to remember their first offers, and when you get into a kid early like this, it's kind of a no risk proposition for the school because it's not a legitimate offer, but at least it puts you on the radar. At least it gets you in the game. So a lot of upside, really no downside to doing it, and it just shows how aggressive Ohio State's being out there in the recruiting world. And I think that's what you got to be to compete with the big boys. So I applaud it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, obviously, with a guy who's like a defensive end, there's not really a lot of downside. With a quarterback, there could be a lot of downside because, as everyone knows, we took Danny Clark, and then by the end of his career, we were moving off of him for Tate Martell. And then you have the uncomfortable situation of telling a kid that his commitment is no longer wanted. And, it's hard, especially with a quarterback, because, a lot of these kids, they commit as sophomores and going into their junior year, because most teams only take one quarterback. You might have a rare case where you take two just because you're short on numbers. Kids transfer out, kids go pro early. But generally, you want to take one kid that you're solid with, who's really good, and that's it. But with Danny, he didn't develop at the rate that that Urban Meyer and Tom Herman and Tim Beck and all them they required. So they moved on to Tate, who was the National Player of the Year. So for me, it's a lot of risk, especially with quarterbacks. But most quarterbacks, if you don't offer them their sophomore years, you're going to be out of the game. So you better, figure out a way to project them as good as you can, because if you don't offer them early, you're not going to be a part of the process with them. But I figured we could, I put his offer list up. I mean, if you told me this kid was a senior and he was like a safety, 6'3", 190, maybe a receiver, I'd believe it, just because he physically is very developed for an 8th grader. Now, is he going to end up, the great guessing games, is he going to end up being 6'6", 270? Is he going to be 6'4", 220? Yeah, I imagine, as he goes, through high school, he's going to gain a substantial amount of weight just because he is a gym rat. He's very well put together. But yeah, I figured we could just turn some tape on and watch a little bit of it. Again, or it's hard because we're literally watching tape that isn't even high school level. But he's done some combines and he's done a lot of stuff. And the unique thing about a kid like this is that he gets moved up into the big group. So he's going against guys that are 12th graders when he is an 8th grader. Like this kid right here is a senior, and he's, so it's crazy. He's such a little, kid, but I mean, compared to a guy that's 330 pounds, who's, 5 years older than him. I mean, he's hanging in there. He's not scared. But you see the burst, you see the speed, you see why Georgia and Ohio State would offer this kid as an 8th grader, because he doesn't really look like an 8th grader. And with 4 more years or even 3 more years if he reclassifies, I mean, you can see how defined he is, how put together he is. He's a workout warrior. His dad's a trainer and trains him, and you could tell when he goes through these drills that it's not his first time doing bag drills and pass rush drills. And but Nevada, what's your initial reaction to seeing this kid? I mean, he's maybe 14 or 15 years old, and watching this kid run around at a high school camp.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point that his dad's a trainer. So you can tell that this is a kid that's kind of gotten a jump start on everybody else in terms of the strength and conditioning, on the familiarity with drills, on little things like hand positioning and how to hand fight. And, but again, the trick is going to be, how is this going to project out to the future? As I've got a lot of experience in the hockey world, and, there's a pretty prominent draft called the Phenom draft where they're drafting kids at 14 years old and then trying to project them, out to 17, 18, 19, 20 years old in terms of performance. And it's difficult. And that's kind of what this is doing here from a football standpoint. And, the big question is, did this kid just win the race to puberty? Did he just get a head start on his peers because, his dad has been able to advance him up the development, thresholds, or is this guy really, something else? But it's fun to look at these kids, because I can tell you what, 8th graders didn't look like that when I was in 8th grade. That's for sure.
No, yeah, and this is Under Armour has like it's like an 8th grade all-star game basically. That's why you see the kids with all their the mishmash of helmets, kids from all over the country playing this 8th grade Under Armour game. And I mean, he's a force, and I don't think a lot of these tackles probably haven't even lifted weights yet, let alone have the speed to keep up with them. You see these tackles just don't have the ability to stay in front of the kid. But I mean, it's not his fault he's put in the work. It's not his fault that his dad is really working with him. I mean, he's got good hands, he's powerful. He plays with a great motor, which, I mean, of all the things, obviously speed and all that is great, but watch this play is amazing. He stops on a dime, tracks this kid down, runs, in an all-star game where a lot of kids might not go as hard as you'd want or whatever, but the kid's effort is outstanding. So that's something that I think really gives him a chance. The quickness, obviously, this right tackle's had a rough day against him, but to be fair, this right tackle's never seen anything like this kid in his life. So when a lot of these linemen go to these all-star games, they've never, at any level, when you're a 12th grader at the Under Armour or what used to be the Army All-American game, they've never seen defensive tackles and defensive ends like they're seeing in these games. So that's why a lot of times the linemen get abused and people pan them and say how bad they are. And I'm like, well, yeah, because, in whatever city they're from or league they're in, they don't see guys like these guys, these freak show DNs and D tackles. And, a lot of times it takes a little bit to adjust to it, because it's much harder to pass block than it is to pass rush. Pass rushing is easy, but again, these are from practices, same day. They tried about every right tackle in the world against the kid, and none of them could really touch him. But yeah, it's amazing what these kids look like in 8th grade. Because if someone told me these were sophomores or juniors, I wouldn't really bat an eye. But this kid, again, he's gonna have a huge summer, because if he camps at a few places, I mean, I'm sure he'll get Bama and LSU and basically everybody before he's even a freshman in high school, which is insane. But you see the upside. But no, that was a good point with the Bantam drafts and projecting. What traits do you look for when you're looking at a young athlete who maybe is 14? Like, is it his competitive spirit? I mean, obviously certain physical attributes, his in hockey, his speed, his skating, his headiness, but what do you look for specifically in a young athlete to try to project them, Nevada?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing really, I think there's three things that we're really focusing on, and I think this really goes for any sport, whether it be hockey, football, basketball, or whatever. One, we're looking at intellect in football or hockey IQ, just kind of like what type of an understanding do they have of the game, how much do they love the game, and where are they at on kind of that continuum in terms of their understanding of what is being asked of them and what's going to be asked of them in the future. That's one. Two's their motor. What kind of a motor
Yeah.
do they have? Are they lazy? Do they take plays off? Do they back check? Do they, finish tackles? Do they finish their checks? What goes on in terms of their motor? And third, we like to look at the bloodline. Like, what's their hockey family like? What's their football family like? What's their basketball family
Mhm.
like? Having kids that are kids of coaches or kids of trainers or kids of former NFL players or kids of former NHL players or something, that's a pretty good indicator because, much like
Yeah.
betting horses, it's bloodline. And so if you can find somebody that's got a high intellect, that's got a great motor, that's got obviously got the skill set and comes from a good background or a solid track record of success in whatever sport they're doing, that those are kids that are usually worth a bet on, and that's why this kid's got all these things in abundance, and that's why I think Ohio State made him the youngest offer that I can ever remember in my 20 years of doing this.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember us going on in eighth grade. I don't know if we went on Dylan Moses when he was in eighth grade. I'm sure we offered him at some point, but if you're getting offered by Georgia and Ohio State as an eighth grader, you've got to have some very rare traits and rare ability. And and again, I think that it's a low risk offer, as you mentioned, because it's just an offer to stay in the game, get in the game, if you're even in the game. And the kid's not going to commit, so there's not like a high. It's not like he's some kid from Ohio who it's his dream to go to Ohio State and he's going to commit and you're going to have a 26 commitment, that you're not going to see for 4 or 5 years until he gets here, unless this kid reclassifies, which, physically, given how he works and how he's built, I mean, if he keeps growing, I mean, he could definitely be a kid that could reclassify and be like a Sonny Styles because he's just that freakish athletically. So, no, but yeah, I'll wrap this thing up. This has been a great one. Again, it shows Ohio State's aggression on the recruiting trail. They've got to think outside the box with some of these kids when they're phenoms and get in with them early. And you can't wait on kids like this anymore. And it's crazy. And I think that at some positions it's easier to do it especially like a defensive end type thing. I mean, it's easier to go on a kid than it is at, say, a quarterback because again, like an eighth grade quarterback. I mean, 5 years from now he could be like again, a year ago, like Dylan Raiola, he was an emerging prospect, but he wasn't like anywhere near the number one player in the country. But he's grown. He had a monster season. Didn't I don't even he didn't even camp at Ohio State last year, which is crazy. Because Jaden Davis came to camp, and most of the kids that we've been talking about ad nauseum have been to camp at least for a couple days at Ohio State. All the South Florida Express kids came to camp, and this year it's going to be a totally different deal because I mean these kids are all going to come camp and then they can do their official visit like that same weekend. So, but yeah, this is funny because this kid literally can't even take an official visit for another 3 years, which is nuts. But I'll wrap this thing up. Any closing things, Nevada? It's almost camp season, which is always fun for us because you kind of get to see some fresh faces around the Woody Hayes. But what do you think about this going forward? And do you think this will be a new trend where we start offering kids that are this young?
I don't know if it'll be this young, but I think, Ohio State's certainly making a commitment to getting more aggressive across the board and doing what they have to do to compete with the big dogs in college football. And I think this is just another step in that direction and certainly a positive one. So I think you'll see Ohio State be I mean, Ohio State's a national brand, and they can go in anywhere. And to go into Georgia and go after a kid like this, it just shows that they have a lot of confidence in what they're offering, and that certainly bodes well for Ohio State in the future.
Yeah, and I think when you are going after kids in the South, you have to do something to stand out away from Georgia and LSU and Bama. You have to offer early and say I was one of the first guys to go on you because it's hard to get a lot of these linemen to come north. Like we've had a few, but we don't pull a lot of kids out of Louisiana. We've had good success in Georgia. Don't get many kids out of Alabama. You know, and there's some really freaky guys, and people are like, why can't we get these monster nose guards to come up here? And I was like, well, because they're all from Georgia and they dreamed of being Bulldogs growing up, or they dreamed of being, you know, playing for Bama or playing for LSU. And that's an issue that nothing short of, you know, there being a massive push to the north. You know, the way there's been all these people that have left the north to move to the south. That's been one of the things that's really hurt us in the trenches, is that a lot of the really big, talented, skilled guys, they live in the South now. And a lot of them, they grow up Georgia fans, they grow up Bama fans. I mean, Georgia's had great defensive tackles for as long as I've followed college football, 25 years. And I mean, Marcus Stroud, I mean, guys, they're just different types of dudes, man. They're big, physical, fast. And, you know, I know that, you know, their nose guard, Jordan, you know, the guy that went to Philly, Jordan Davis, is one of your favorite guys in the draft, because you're like, Kirk, how many guys weigh 360 pounds or whatever, or 340 pounds, and they run a 4.740? And I'm like, he honestly might be the only one on earth, literally. Like, I mean, I'm not even being funny, but I mean, it's that impressive and that rare. And, you know, those guys, like I said, they're down in the South. So, gonna wrap this thing. Appreciate you, Nevada, as always. And again, we appreciate you guys. Buckeye Scoop, and we're growing like crazy. This has been an amazing month for us. Getting really primed up for the June camp season. It is going to be a huge camp season for us. We love seeing these kids up close and personal. The South Florida Express is going to bring a ton of guys up here. Dylan Ariola is going to be here. That third weekend is going to be a huge weekend in June for Ohio State recruiting. So there's never been a better time to sign up to the most active message board in the game, the #1 Ohio State site in existence, BuckeyeScoop.com. We appreciate all of your support. Again, comment on maybe some players that, you know, were phenoms early on, guys that you followed in recruiting. Maybe they didn't pan out, maybe they did pan out. But I always love hearing some of the old names. I mean, people love talking about the Fred Davises and the Rico McCoys, and, you know, the guys from the old days where we thought we had them and we offered them early, and you know, just kind of how some of those things play out. So again, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, Scoop family. Thank you, Buckeye Nation, for your support. We love doing this content for you. It's been killer, and we've been growing. So please subscribe, leave us a like, leave us some comments. Appreciate you guys. You guys have a great night. Thanks.